Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? From deputies on patrol, forensics, to some of our cold cases and how some of our officers give back to the community. We'll share stories from the hard-working men and women who serve the citizens of York County. This is YCSO Behind the Badge, the official podcast of the York County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Badge, the official podcast of the York County Sheriff's Office. Each week, we hope, we'll bring you an inside look at the York County Sheriff's Office, revealing the multitude of untold stories of how our officers give back to the community. All stories from your neighbors to the hard-working men and women who serve the citizens of York County every day. Hi, I'm Trent Ferris, Public Information Officer for the York County Sheriff's Office, and also your host. But before we move on, go check us out on our social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And we're on the podcasting service Anchor, but you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Overcast, and Spotify, just to name a few. And lastly, do us a favor and sign up for those Notify Me alerts straight to your phone and email at yorkcountysheriff.com. On the second podcast of Behind the Badge, we have the main man, the myth, the legend, the head honcho, the boss, the high sheriff of York County, Kevin Tolson.
Hey,
Sheriff,
Trent.
how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thanks for allowing us to do these podcasts.
Absolutely.
It's new. It's something different.
That's right.
And
Trying
people,
new things.
Yeah, man, apparently, your administrative assistant, Jessica, is a podcast connoisseur. So
She is.
So she likes to listen to podcasts, and she and some other folks said we should do this. And I think it'll turn out to be a good deal here soon.
Well, we'll see.
All right. Well, starting off, I can't think of any other sheriff in the state or even in the nation that had to deal with so much stuff in the first 4 years of his term than you did. So let's good, bad, and different. How was the first 4 years as being sheriff of York County?
In a word, dynamic. It was certainly didn't go by slowly. Went by fairly quick. Now that I'm finishing up, I guess I'm getting ready. Well, I guess I'm in the last 6 months of my first term, so
right.
3.5 years. A lot of ups and downs. Some really downs.
Right.
But also through those downs, really observing and experiencing the resilience of the men and women in this agency. I think I said it in the past, that tragedy builds character, can build a lot of traits, and would go back, a couple of years and take that back for anything in the world. But obviously we can't do that.
Nope.
And so try to focus on the positive, accentuate the positive, and and of course we're speaking about January of 2018, and there are some things that have come of that would not have ever come of that. Chris and Mike's friends all run a tremendous foundation that seems to be very resilient itself, which I think will be around a long time and doing a lot of good things. So,
and it's the 809 Foundation.
809 Foundation, that's right, in Mike's honor, and I think some just without getting too personal, I think it's always good when you can to look at the good that has come out of something bad, and we can do that in most situations, and so that's a part of my career I'll never obviously ever forget, and it gets a little easier, just like everything else. I mean, when you lose something that's dear to you, time helps, and so some lessons learned from that. Me personally, I learned some things, that I wouldn't have learned. So anyway, that's just a snapshot of, part of my first term, and we have done some, I think, really good things also in first term, and what I an analogy that I like to use, and Sheriff Bryant probably kicked me for this, but I inherited a really, really polished, nice looking car. And that's what people see,
right.
And that's what people, and the sheriff's office has been a very nicely running car for
a well-oiled machine
for a long time. And so, what I think some people may have thought was going to happen is they're going to see those outside changes, those visible changes that a lot of agencies that Bruce had a lot of things when he took over office. There were a lot of good things to do. There were a lot of good programs to start. There were a lot of ideas to be watered and watched grow. And so he did a lot of those things. And so I'm working on the engine. Every engine needs
an oil change,
or at 100,000 miles, at 250,000 miles, you might need an overhaul.
Right.
And so I've been doing things, internally, looking at things internally. We made some organizational changes, and we took a career ladder program and tweaked it, and I think made it better based on input from officers and employees here. And we made one thing that is very visible. We made a very drastic uniform change, and that was a lot of that decision behind that was driven by interviews that I had with employees, and some health reasons behind it too. When you carry around 20 to 30 pounds on your hip, and it surrounds your waist as you sit in a car, sometimes 5, 6, 7, 8 hours a night, that has a physical toll on you. When you can take that off of your waist and redistribute it to your chest area, there's some health benefits to the uniform change. And by the uniform change, I mean we went from a more traditional Class A, is what they call that uniform type. It's more of a dressy uniform, to a more utility uniform with an outer carrier that, and by outer carrier I mean it's the carrier of your ballistic vest.
Right. Yep.
And so a benefit to that is those things get hot, especially in the summertime. And if you've ever, anybody who's ever worn a vest in August in South Carolina through a shift knows that you just go home drenched.
Yep.
And excuse me. So one benefit to that is you just unzip it. If you're in the office and you need to cool off, you just unzip it and it opens up and you can air out.
Yeah. Dry off a little bit.
Yeah. Put some of your equipment more readily available in front of you, and so the officers, I've heard really good feedback. Haven't heard much, really very little negative feedback from the public on that change. I expected a little more than what I got. So there's a couple of things.
Well,
first
good.
Term.
Well, good. So we covered that. So let's go in the Wayback Machine. You started law enforcement a long time ago. So let's start there. Let's start where, why did you get in law enforcement in the first place? You're now the sheriff, and that years ago you had to start at the beginning, just like everybody else. So.
So ever since I can remember being able to have outdoor or indoor activities and play with friends and cousins, and my parents, I was always the cop and the cousins were the robbers, and I was, always the good guy and the other person was always the bad guy. And my parents told me that ever since they could remember, that I told them I was going to be a police officer when I was just a little young guy. And I never wavered on that. Not once. Talk about, being called.
Right.
Some people talk about how they get into their professions, and so I never considered, really, I'm serious, I never considered doing anything else.
Most kids want to be a fighter pilot or an astronaut or a doctor.
Yeah. I guess I was smart enough to know I was too dumb to do most of those things. So
Me too.
I was at least smart enough to know that. And so, all through middle school, high school, my papers, your essays and those kinds of things, they always focused on social issues, social studies, social issues, crime issues, and so I went to University of South Carolina. They still have a good criminal justice program. They had. I know. I see the look. I tell my
Go Tigers.
I tell my Clemson friends. I'm sorry, I have no Clemson friends. I tell my Clemson fans that are associates that's the only program that had criminal justice in the state at the time.
Which is true.
Which is true. It was a school. It was an actual school at USC at the time. It's now in the sociology school, and it's still a major. But anyway, went there, graduated with a degree in criminal justice. Worked throughout my college career. Maintained a job at Carowinds that I started in 1984. Actually was able to transition into full time for my last almost 2 years of school, which was beneficial to me. They paid for my school. Very thankful for that, and shortly after graduating USC, I was hired at the Sheriff's Office, 1992.
Which was not an easy feat back then.
It was very difficult. These young folks that are being hired now that just click on the website and fill something out and boom, you're in the process. It wasn't that easy, and literally. New positions didn't come by very easy from council, and so literally somebody had to die or leave, and that's really it's kind of the slot that I got. And an older detective had a heart attack and died, and that ripple effect of something of an opening coming up. Yeah, very unfortunate.
Unfortunate,
but
fortunate.
Fortunate for me, and so boy, I remember those days. 92, 93, 94, I almost felt guilty taking a paycheck. I'm like, you're going to pay me to do this? I'd come home on the weekends from the academy and work for free, and I just want to be out there. I just wanted to answer calls and just be active and find crime and do all those things that a young officer that loves to do, and I was fortunate enough to do a good many things early in my career and move around a little bit. Worked narcotics, which was just a blast, and that morphed into a task force that I was on that was a regional federal task force, which took me to New York a couple times, and like I said, I just felt guilty every other Friday taking that paycheck. I didn't feel too guilty because I cashed it, but it was just I just remember those days. Those people say those were the days. Those were the days.
The good old days.
Yeah, it was very enjoyable, very fulfilling. Of course, I'm single, no children, no other
at the time
obligations. Yeah, no other obligations at the time, and so just really have really fond memories of those times back then.
Good. So you worked here, and then you moved on to SLED for a little bit. And then back here for the solicitor's office, correct?
Yep. Left here in 99. Yeah, 99. That was the year that I got married, and most people, I don't know who's going to be listening to this podcast.
Most everybody.
Most people knows the story.
A lot of people listen.
Yeah.
In my mind.
But anyway, married the boss's daughter here.
What?
Yeah, so that created a sort of a triad of family members here, because the daughter worked here too. So I was fortunate enough to land another job at the State Law Enforcement Division. Another really cool job, another really cool opportunity for me to go and work across the state, work with other agencies, other officers, and there's nothing that I like more probably than to have a group of officers from different agencies in a room formulating a plan and executing the plan, and we all work, that bond that you just have in law enforcement, and so that was really cool to be able to travel the upstate and work cases, and worked a few cases that weren't so pleasant to work, where I had to unfortunately arrest and lead to the conviction of police officers. But I don't begrudge that. The last case that I actually worked as an agent was a police officer who was using his position as a police officer to molest young boys, and was able to, successfully put a case together, prosecute him, and got an extensive amount of time. And there are cases where I worked against officers where I knew that the officer was being unfairly accused of whatever, and you sort of feel for those officers, but in those circumstances where it's just outright just wrong,
right?
I didn't feel bad at all. But so I worked at SLED for a couple of years, and then solicitor Tommy Pope had a baby on the way. I had a baby on the way. Solicitor Pope didn't have a baby on the way, I don't think. But I'm getting to the reasons why I left SLED. The state relied. That's about the same time video poker had its demise.
Right.
And the state, believe it or not, depended on a lot of that money, a lot of that permit money, and a lot of the tax money, because that was a very profitable business.
Oh yeah.
And so that went away, and the state budget kind of tanked. Things got really tight at SLED. I'd already taken a pay cut to go there. Raises weren't happening. Overtime wasn't happening. I had a small child on the way. The wife wasn't crazy about the travel necessarily. So anyway, was offered a position at the solicitor's office by then Solicitor Pope, and took that job as an investigator with his office, which obviously kept me here local. And that was, I think, in the summer, and then by the fall, late fall, that had morphed into an idea that several leaders here had to form a forensic unit that mirrored the very successful drug unit that we have. And so I was instrumental in helping form that unit, and then was offered the directorship position. So I headed that unit up for about 8 years until then Solicitor Brackett called me back, and I worked cases there at the solicitor's office as an investigator until I ran in 2016.
So where in the point of all that you go, I think I might want to take a shot at the big chair one day? I mean, is that part of it?
Yeah, sorry, I had a text.
That's all right.
I watched Sheriff Bryant for 20 years, be sheriff, and probably year 14, I guess, maybe 6 years. I'm guessing 6 years out. He and I would talk, and he would ask me, "You got any aspirations? What do you think?" And I bounced back and forth with it early on, and then I started thinking, I love the place. It's where my career started, and there's some things that I'd like to see done that I never really meddled at, and interjected my point of view or my thoughts into Bruce's decision making. It was his plane to fly.
Right.
It wasn't my plane, and I wasn't in a co-pilot seat. I was
in coach.
I wasn't even I wasn't necessarily even a passenger. I was an onlooker that looked up in the sky and saw it flying. And so as I continued to think about it more, and our children aged to where it was a manageable age where I didn't feel like I was slighting family time, with the kids running a campaign and then being successful. And so there wasn't really an aha moment. It was just more of a transition into, I think this would be a good thing. And I know that Sheriff Bryant didn't want to, he would have still have been, or at least trying to be sheriff, if he did not feel like that whoever was going to run in his place, he wasn't comfortable with sort of handing it off to.
Right.
And so, that didn't necessarily play into that's kind of a side note. Were it not me or someone else, and I'm sure there were other people that he would have felt comfortable with that decided they wanted to do, he would still probably be here.
Well,
so he handed off a nice 4 years, the next 4 years.
Well, good. He got the next 4 years, and then luckily this year nobody's running against you. Yeah. So you have another 4 years. Yeah. Anything heading into the next 4 years that you might be thinking, keep oil in the machine, or What are the?
Yeah, well,
if you have a crystal ball, 4 years between now and 4 years,
we're probably going to experience some significant personnel changes as this department ages. And by ages, I mean the people in it age. I mean
people retire out.
Yeah, people are starting to retire out, and so my thoughts are on that who's going to succeed who's going to be the next lieutenant, captain, chief, deputy, jail administrator. I'm not starting any rumors.
No,
I'm just naming
this is not the rumor mill, folks.
Yeah, but and so there are some. I want to continually focus on recruitment and retention.
Right.
That's been a major focus over the last couple of years, really, with the sheriff's office and the county council has been extremely supportive in my endeavors, and that I can't say how important it is and how thankful I am that I have a good working relationship with our county council.
Right.
They don't always agree individually with me. I'm not always going to individually agree with them, but that's business. That's county government, but by and large they are supportive of law enforcement, and they're supportive of what my endeavors have been in the recruitment and retention, because it is challenging.
Yeah, especially nowadays.
Just as hard as it was to get a job here in 1992, it's nearly as hard to find a good, solid young man or young woman who wants to do this job, who's going to stay. And that's a nationwide issue. It's not a York County issue. It's happening everywhere, and there are a number of reasons probably why this generation is different. We're being painted by the mainstream media in such a way that is not fair to lump us all into one category that we're being lumped into by the mainstream media, in my opinion.
Right.
We've got some bad folks that don't need to be being police officers, but the worst thing we need to do is to run the good ones off by persecuting them. And so that's going to be a challenge. Employee morale, those internal things that I've really trying to been focused on, those will obviously be in the forefront. And we're being involved in more and more social programs, and I don't see the sheriff's office lessening their involvement in that. But there are some legislative ideas that I'd like to hopefully be able to have a little influence in our mental health area.
You've always talked about that.
Yeah, it's our well, I don't know if you want to get into it, but my perspective on it. But law enforcement's role in the mental health field should be somewhat limited, but unfortunately we're bearing a lot of the burden on the defunding of the mental health system over the years.
Right.
And so I'd like to have a little part in change in some of that.
Good. Well, good. Well, you touched on it a little bit, and this is always the last question we always tell everybody. If you were at 1992, if you had somebody to tell you one thing, in 1992 that you would tell somebody today, a new officer who is looking to get into law enforcement or just got sworn in today, what is the one piece of advice that you would give that person if you had an opportunity of somebody give you that advice in 1992? What would it be?
Find a good mentor at your agency. Find somebody you connect with that does the right thing and is going to teach you the right way, and really listen to that person.
Right.
Do the right thing, even if the right thing might cost you a little bit.
Right.
But I'd say that, and also be sure this is what you want to do.
Right. You don't want to get into it.
Make sure you feel the calling. Something will tug you. Something will let you know that it's for you. Don't apply here, and don't say that you want to be a police officer just because you want to try it out.
Try it out, yeah.
Yeah. You know whether or not if you want to be a police officer, just like whether or not you want to be a firefighter.
Right.
I mean, if you're 25 years old, very few people try it out and say, wow, I really like this. No, I'm sure it happens, but be sure you want to be here.
Good. And you always say, make sure you have respect for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who can have that respect for somebody. You say it to everybody you swear in. We have it in big words on the wall in the training room over there. Have respect for everybody. Respect. I always like that, and I always tell everybody that.
Yeah. So it's important, and I can't teach you that at the time you're old enough to be a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
You've already learned that, and that's probably what I need to incorporate too when I swear folks in.
Just write it down.
You either got it, you either have it, or you don't. And if you don't, then you need to walk out of this room if you don't have the ability to treat people with respect.
Well, good deal, Sheriff. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to add before we close it out for the Behind the Badge? Because I think we got a good picture of the man behind the badge.
A good start.
That's the purpose of the podcast, is to get a image of the person behind the badge, because everybody has this image of the sheriff or a deputy, and they think there's a two-dimensional type person, and there's a whole lot more behind that person. So,
well, any chance that I get to thank the community for their support that I have experienced, not in the last 3.5, but the last 28 years. York County is a special place, and they by and large hold their law enforcement near and dear to their hearts and support us, and that's a big undertaking to try to keep that level of trust built up.
Yeah, and we have a good support.
Yeah, we do.
Around the country you might not see it, but here, we'll have our Facebook trolls every now and then, but we have a lot of support from the folks here in York County, and I'm sure I appreciate it, and I know you appreciate it. So
absolutely,
and we all appreciate you stepping in here to the podcast, in which you allow me to do.
Nice studio.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Got the mood lighting and everything. Well, before we go, just a reminder for folks, just go check us out on our Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn page, and also YouTube, where you can hear this podcast on a video type of setting. So if you could do that, you can listen to us there, and also all those other podcasting services we mentioned earlier. Anchor Podcasting, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, most any other podcast services you can probably find us on. So let us know what you think. Email me at sheriff.pio@yorkcountygov.com and let me know what you think about it, and anything other topics you want to hear us talk about in the future. And lastly, sign up for those Notify Me alerts straight to your phone and email at yorkcountysheriff.com. You get information straight to you when it happens. If it's a significant event happens in York County, we try to tell you about it as soon as we can. Sheriff, again, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And we'll see you next time on Behind the Badge.
See ya.